All right, so why virtual upskilling? So I assume this isn't a question that many of you have today, but I'll just sort of explain how C.H. Robinson ended up doing virtual upskilling, because Hatchery was primarily in person. It was all about, okay, how do we get hands on a computer, and maybe I can look over your shoulder and check to make sure that you're doing a good job and that you're all caught up with what we're working through. And really why this started was the pandemic. But now it doesn't seem like we're going to go back. So Megan, in our talent acquisition, and myself as well, having found candidates from all over the United States and now even in Poland, it's going to be really tough to convince us that, you know, we only want to hire in Minnesota. And I think Minnesota has phenomenal talent. Again, most of our employees do still come from that talent pool, but it is really tempting and fantastic now to be able to hire from virtually anywhere. So we don't see ourselves going back. And Hatchery is a 3-month onboarding program. So we need to find a way to adapt that program. So that's why we moved to virtual upskilling. And now an added advantage is that we can simultaneously train Poland and the United States. And that is something where without the ability to teleport, I am unable to do without the use of Zoom or Teams or the like. So that is why we have transitioned to virtual upskilling. And thank you, Greg, so much for dropping a question in the chat. Quality of virtual lab / learning systems. Do the virtual learning systems actually teach the skills effectively? And I've got a few comments about that in the talk, but I think it's a really fair question. I did in preparation. I don't typically get academic in my talk, but last night I knew there were a few things that might come across or might have questions about, and I don't actually know what the academic literature says. I was specifically looking for, cameras on versus cameras off, because I know that's a hot button topic that we'll probably get into a little today. But do the virtual learning systems actually teach the skills effectively? I think it depends on what you're trying to teach and how you're teaching it. I can say for us, for our needs, they are teaching the skills effectively. We are able to teach people to do full stack React, C#.NET, SQL Server as the database, full stack applications, and how to deploy that within C.H. Robinson's environment through Teams. And the labs are really important. I'm glad you called that out, because it's not just about lecturing. It's definitely not me talking for 3 hours, because that is painful. What I've noticed from feedback is essentially the less I talk, the higher the reviews are. The more time we can spend in labs, the more time we can spend hands-on with the technology, the better people perform. And so do we teach it effectively? I like to think that the answer is yes, but I'm sure there are ways that we can improve. So yeah, I used to spend a lot of time teaching in person. I certainly miss that interactive aspect, but I think we are getting much closer and closer over time to matching what we were doing in person. All right, so why virtual upskilling? Again, keep the questions in the chat coming. I want to make sure I talk about what's relevant and what people are actually interested in, rather than just the things I want to talk about today. So a few disclaimers before we jump into the bulk of the content. These are opinions. They are not facts. So these are tips. They are things that were incredibly helpful to us as we were struggling and fumbling through converting our in-person program to a virtual program. But they might not work in all cases. So my situation isn't the same as yours. C.H. Robinson is incredibly supportive of the Hatchery program. We've been given time and space to develop really robust curriculum. You might be looking to upskill some people on a small team of 5, and you don't have support from your corporate level, from a corporate sponsor, and that is a much different situation. So please don't take this as, if you're not doing these today, everything you're doing is wrong. That's absolutely not the case. People are in different situations. I completely understand this. And along with that, these tactics likely won't work for everyone. So the way I train, where I train, is in a corporate environment. These individuals are employees. So there are a lot of things that we can do that we might not be able to do if it was a setting like a boot camp or a college. Things like requiring cameras on, or requiring certain amounts of participation or certain engagement might not be as easy to do if someone is paying you for the training, rather than when they're employees and they're being paid to be at the training. So we have some significant advantages there, and I don't want to say that my situation is the same as yours. Next, you're encouraged to disagree with me publicly. Please drop it in the chat. If there's something on these slides and you were like, you are a fool, please post in the chat. I had if, and then I crossed that out and said when you think I get it wrong. So please do post in the chat when you think that I'm missing the mark. All right, another question in the chat. Fantastic. How much of the curriculum is CHR specific, as in this is how we do it, versus industry courseware? This is a question I could talk about for a very long time, which is exciting to me. It's almost all CHR specific. So we hire really talented computer science grads and bootcamp grads. So we expect a base level of general understanding. So we're not going to teach you how to write an if statement. We're not going to teach you how to write a loop. These are sort of default expectations that we have for our new hires. So everything we teach is essentially CH Robinson specific. Now, within, say, the first couple of days of our React training, that's not too CH Robinson specific. But when we get into week 2, which is, all right, how do we write it at CH Robinson with, we're going to use React hooks, we're going to deploy using Jenkins, maybe in the future using Azure DevOps, and all of that is intended to be CH Robinson specific. So how do we actually go into your role here at CH Robinson? It's intended as a 3-month training program for people to be ramped up at the company. And that feels like a lot, 3 months just to get sort of the flavor of CH Robinson and how we write code. But there are so many things, from the style guides, from how we write SQL, which is different from everyone else's flavor of how they're going to write SQL. So it's all very CH Robinson specific, which has been incredibly helpful as people have been joining their teams, because they don't need to look at Stack Overflow and think, maybe this is how we do it. Some people on the internet consider it a best practice to do it this way. Instead, it's, no, this is how our enterprise architects would like you to be writing really robust code here at CH Robinson. Fantastic question. Thanks so much for that, Chris. Would love to get more questions into the chat. These tangents are going to be the most fun part of today for me. All right, so let's talk about the challenges of virtual upskilling. So at the beginning, I asked for people to drop challenges into the chat. Please do drop your own challenges into the chat, because right now this just feels like a personal confession of my own and all of the things I struggle with while teaching remotely. So if you have had any experiences teaching remotely or upskilling remotely, please drop those into the chat and let's focus our conversation today around that. So for me personally, it's not as much fun. Honestly, my jokes, I'm hilarious. You can tell that from just even the beginning of this. And the jokes, I can't tell if they land or not. And really, that's what I am, is a failed comedian who just decided to get into teaching and software instead. So I can't tell if people are laughing at my jokes. Megan does a great job of keeping her camera on and smiling and laughing. Appreciate that. But I also have no idea if people are paying attention. So there are situations where people turn off their cameras and maybe disappear for a couple of minutes or an hour. And it's really hard in those situations to know, like, hey, are you there? Are you asleep? And again, this comes back to incredibly spoiled at CH Robinson, where these people are employees. We can set certain expectations. I'm certainly not claiming to have the same challenges of, say, elementary school teachers or middle school teachers who might have their kids disappear and take a nap and have to call a parent. That totally not the same. And I don't want to say that what I'm struggling with is the same in any regard. It's also harder to help when things go wrong. I can't look over a shoulder. I know screen sharing, absolutely a thing, but then I have to teach someone how to screen share versus looking over their shoulders. So there are things that are more challenging about being virtually in that regard. It's also harder to build relationships. It's harder to have that fun, interactive back and forth. There are definitely tools to improve this, like playing games and just making sure that the environment is collaborative and interactive. Oh my goodness, Sylvia, it's so hard to talk to black boxes, and I'm gonna speak to that a little bit, because again, I am spoiled at CH Robinson, and we've kind of come up with our own solution, but it's certainly not relevant to every situation, and it is draining. There have been classes where I didn't require cameras on, and when you're in hour 2 of talking to 20 black boxes, Teams at least gives you initials, but that doesn't help much after hour 1. It really is a drag to talk to all of those black boxes, where you're just like, no idea who's here or if you're in it or if you're engaged. And absolutely. Maddie, how much of the curriculum is LMS, learning management system based versus virtual calls? So we don't actually, well, we do. So LMS we use for our general onboarding at C.H. Robinson. So for a lot of things that all employees must do, those we use Workday Learning as our LMS for that. But for anything tech specific, we're actually using GitHub as where we are storing all of our curriculum, and people work through the GitHub, but they work through the GitHub with me as the instructor. So it's mostly virtual calls. So it's 3 hours of virtual calls a day, which is a lot. And I know we'll get to that, and I'm sure people have opinions about that. That is a lot, but it's 3 hours of virtual calls where we are working together through this curriculum. And then we don't have homework or additional material outside of that. We really time box it to those 3 hours to say, this is when we get your attention. Outside of that, you don't need to be learning extra stuff, because that's a lot of pressure that new employees often put on themselves that we don't want to accidentally induce. These are the questions I'm talking about. These are the tough questions where a year ago, I wouldn't have known our answer. And again, these are our answers, but they are not global answers. And I hope to look back and think that maybe these aren't the right answers 5 years from now. So I hope to continue adapting my position on this. Harder to know when participants get lost. So again, you don't get the confused looks. You really have to work hard to build that into the chat, to have those conversations, to make sure people feel comfortable asking. Otherwise, especially if you're recording, people might get to the end and say, well, you know, I really didn't understand anything we talked about today, but I'm sure I'll go back and watch that 3-hour recording. They won't, but they'll tell themselves that. And so that is another challenge that we've had. It's also harder to get feedback in those small ways, whether that's visual cues, but in some other ways, we'll talk about how it's somewhat easier to get feedback as far as forms and getting people to fill those out and asking for that more direct feedback. Lastly, feeling like you're on an island. Maybe this is just me, but especially if you're a solo instructor staring at those 20 black squares, it can be really challenging to feel like, all right, I don't know if I'm in this, where I rely a lot on my students, my participants, to give me that energy to tell me, okay, where are we going here? Is this valuable? Are we talking about things that you want? And more, so please put your answers in the chat. Again, the questions coming in are fantastic. So thank you so much. All right, let me read through the questions. Hence my awesome avatar. Deborah, fantastic avatar. It's absolutely terrific. Stephen, do you have cohorts going through the same training together so they have opportunity to do breakouts to get to know each other better? So this is something where I don't feel like I've mastered it. So if people have other ideas or things that have worked for them, what has happened when we've created breakouts is there's often a lull, or people will sort of stall out, and it's harder to ask questions. So they can't just pop up in class, in a physical classroom. We used to always do breakouts. So we'd have groups of 3 or 4. We'd have people break out and talk about a problem or tackle a challenge, and we'd talk through that together. And when people had a question, they could just kind of turn to you or raise their hand, and you could sort of be brought over to that group. Now, there are some functionalities that do that in Teams and in chat, and you can sort of get a ping and then join the group, but it's certainly not as fluid as in person. So what we've landed on for now is that we just all stay in a big group. And because this is 3 months long, people are comfortable enough speaking up in front of that group. I don't know if that same tactic would work for, say, a team of 20 doing a 4-day long training. I don't know that you could build that level of camaraderie and that level of comfort speaking up. So again, those are things where that's the attack that we've taken, but I don't know if that would work in your situation, Stephen. So we don't use breakout rooms all that often. Yes, and just to describe what the cohort is, we have 2 cohorts. So when I say cohort, it's not overlapping cohorts or cohorts working simultaneously. It's essentially 2 groups, one in January, one in June, who all start together, who do build these relationships over the course of the 3 months. And because of that level of camaraderie, that level of interplay, we're able to do some of these things. all of the questions in the chat, I'm like, this is not the right answer. This is our answer. So they're really tough. Do very much thank you for asking. And if other people have their own answers, feel free to drop those in the chat as well. You don't need to worry about hurting my feelings. You won't. I am wrong so frequently that I am very used to it. So feel free to drop your own answers, your own solutions into the chat. Okay, so tip number one, be interactive. So this is something I really struggled with switching to virtual because I didn't have these skills initially, but use virtual as an advantage. And one thing I mean by that is you can use the chat to create some of that. And I've been trying to do some of that today, and people have fantastically been reflecting their own things in the chat back to me. Use that as an advantage. One thing that I don't have to do anymore is ask for one person's answer or call on someone to answer a question. So what I do now oftentimes is I'll say, all right, today we're going to talk about web APIs. What is a web API? What are we going to use it for? What's its purpose? Why do we need it at all? Why can't a front end just connect directly to a database? We're going to wait 2 minutes, have everyone type their answer in the chat. Don't hit enter yet. At the end of 2 minutes, we'll have everyone hit enter and we'll talk through some of those answers. That's something we definitely couldn't do in person. And now I love it because it gets everyone engaged and thinking about the problem before we even start with class. It's not one person doing it. It's not me doing a 5-minute review of the previous day. It's people actually thinking and engaging and typing their own answers and solutions into the chat. And that has been a phenomenal way to kick off our days. I have been misusing the raise hand feature for about 1.5 years now, and it's been so valuable. So you can do this also by saying, all right, everyone, when you're done with this thing, like this message in the chat. And once I get 16 likes, that means we're ready to move on. But I'll also say, all right, next, I want you to build the HTTP request to the server. And we'll pause and I'll say, when you complete that task, hit the raise hand button. When everyone has their hand raised, that's when we'll move on. And maybe we have 1 or 2 at the end who are still struggling with it. And I'll ask, all right, so it seems like you're struggling with this. What are you struggling with? Now, that only works because we have such a supportive community and nobody's worried about their status. That might not work in your situation. Calling out individuals who you don't know that well and who you don't have a relationship with, that's not what I'm encouraging here. But in a situation where you know your class and you know the group, it can be really beneficial to say, all right, everybody hit the raise hand button when you're done. I'm planning to take 5 minutes to do this, but if it takes people 10 minutes and if I've guessed this wrong, we don't have to move on until people understand this. And that means that everyone's actually following along. And that has been a huge advantage versus me guessing whether or not people are all caught up. I can have them hit the raise hand button. And that's not something we were able to do in person. I couldn't ask everybody to just, all right, hold your hand in the air for the next 5 to 10 minutes while everyone else finishes up. So this has been a real fantastic misuse of that raise hand feature that I've just been so happy with. Also, use tools like Kahoots or shared documents. So in addition to asking, let's start with Kahoot. So for those who don't know, Kahoot is essentially an online quiz game that allows you to make your content a little bit more interactive. We use this at the beginning of talks, of tech talks, and we also use them at the end to sort of check knowledge. But at the beginning, there's a lot of, I'm not really sure what this topic is. It's okay if you get most of the answers wrong, but what it does is prime participants to think, okay, I got that wrong today. I'm going to really pay attention when Luke talks about Azure or Azure DevOps or deployment, whatever it is. I'm going to hone in on that because I know that I got it wrong in the Kahoot at the beginning, and at the end we could go back to the same Kahoot or hit a different Kahoot. And then shared documents. So Lisa's going to one-up me here and say, I love using Miro for collaboration during live sessions. Miro is a fantastic tool. It's absolutely. So we don't use Miro. We use a Word doc because I'm that cool. So it's like a Google Doc now because it's in the cloud, but I'll put everybody's name on it and have people suggest different things. So if we're looking for feedback or a retro, I'll put everybody's name on it and you're expected to fill in your section. Or if we're doing introductions, we'll do those at the beginning of a cohort. Everyone's responsible for filling in their own section of this Word document so that we have it later. So I use it similarly to the chat, but we have that later. And now Lisa's just trying to make me feel good by saying Google Doc works as well too. But yes, Miro is phenomenal. If you haven't checked out that tool, please do. It's terrific. So I'm not gonna pretend that my Google Doc or Word doc is nearly as good as Miro. An absolutely phenomenal tool. Cool to use, really great engagement that way. Next, and this I think is the slide where I get backlash. I thought about leading with it, but I said, all right, I'm going to bury it as number 2 because then I won't get quite as much blowback. Training is not a vacation. I don't think that's where I'm going to get my blowback from. So training is not a vacation, especially for anyone who's been doing this for a while. You know that you can end up with students or employees in your classes who are just there to take a break, right? Especially if this is just not something they wanted to be a part of. This is just going to be their, all right, I'll show up, I'll turn my audio on, I'll listen for my name in case that comes up. But otherwise, I'm just going to peace out and watch some Netflix on the side here, which is why I do require cameras on. Again, this is incredibly situational. I am not telling you you need to have cameras on in order to be a fantastic instructor or facilitator. This is what we've used at C.H. Robinson, and it's an incredible tool. Again, it only works because we have a certain level of trust that I am not using it as a panopticon to watch them and watch their every move. You're allowed to step away from your camera. You're allowed to sneeze. You're allowed to be like, hey, I need to go take care of a cat or a baby that is screaming in the next room. All of that is completely allowed, but it needs to be the default for us. Because otherwise all of those 20 black squares, it just didn't work. It didn't work for us. So this, I understand, will be the most controversial, or I think will be the most controversial, but if people have strategies for cameras off that have still resulted in high engagement, please share those in the chat. That would be a tip beyond the 7 that I have here that really helps, but I am in complete agreement with Sylvia. It really helps to build connections to have those cameras on. There are size limits to that. You have 100 people on a call, you're not going to get that level of connection anyway, but something 20 or less, it's just so helpful, so helpful. And there may be days where that's not possible. So I added a bonus tip, which is really just me using it as a cop-out, which is please be sure to balance that. So take long breaks, be patient with people when things go wrong, have fun, play games, and if possible, and this, again, us being spoiled at C.H. Robinson, have one-on-one time with those participants so they know that your goal is not to watch them or to hound them. Your goal is to make sure that they are successful in their, for us, it's in their first role at C.H. Robinson. If you make sure that they know that you're on their team and you're not their evaluator or you're not the one who is just trying to make their life miserable, that makes it a lot easier. Again, not possible in every situation. If it's possible in your situation, highly recommend it. Cool. I know this hasn't been a ton, but just having something in the chat was the thing I was most nervous about today, because again, I'm spoiled with the same group every week. So I know they're going to call me out when I'm wrong or when I say stupid stuff. So please keep the chat, comment, love it. Next, tip number 3, run a prep session. The first couple of sessions we did, we were like, all right, we're going to put everything in this 12-hour block and we'll have everybody start their installs on the first day, and that will get everybody ramped up and we'll build that into the class. That was really uncomfortable. So what this prep session allows is to get the awkward out of the way. So there are several things. So when we talked about those rules that we have, people don't necessarily expect those. This allows us to set those ground rules in advance for us to say, all right, for this class, we do expect that your cameras are on. This is not a hop in, hop out class, which means we expect you to be here for the full 12 hours. And a lot of those rules are jarring if you're thrown right into it, because it's like, well, I don't have my camera set up, or I am not prepared for this, or my background. And you'll also notice I try to lower the bar as far as backgrounds are concerned. This is incomplete drywall. This is a wire hanging over the side. So while trying to maintain some level of professionalism, I make it clear, like, hey, if you're in a sweatshirt and hoodie, if you're in a t-shirt and you roll out of bed, if you're still in your bed, cameras on, all of that is fine. But that level of comfort isn't built in 3 minutes. So having this prep session can help to get that awkward out of the way. Next, this is primarily important in tech training. Installs, software, and permissions checks are so important. For us, we have so many systems at C.H. Robinson, and security is incredibly important that we don't give every single engineer access to every single system. Hopefully that's true of any company over the size of 10, where not every engineer, not every person has access to every database, to every table, to every single piece of information. So making sure you have the access necessary for the class to be successful, make sure that we've done systems checks, make sure we've done installs. So this prep session, we host 4 days in advance of the class to make sure, hey, if these things are broken, let's get them working before Monday, because we spent probably an hour at the beginning of every class the first time we ran it doing this. And for some participants, they're done in 10 minutes. They're done in 10 minutes at that point. So it is a nice balance to be able to do that in advance. And then as the instructor, test your own environment as well. Make sure that what you expect to happen is happening. All right, next, make it special. And this can come in a whole variety of forms, but limiting class size, requiring registration, marketing heavily to fill the classes has been are really easy ways. So those have been really easy ways to make the class feel special. And this, I think I'll get some pushback on as well, but I feel strongly that for these live classes, we don't record them. I think if you're going to record a class, record it separately and upload that, maybe 5-minute videos, and have people follow along with that if you want it to be led on your own, or you want to use a learning management system for that. That's, I think, a great strategy. I would not record the classes because we intentionally make our classes really boring to watch, right? Not intentionally, but it is a side effect of, hey, spend 5 minutes typing your answer in the chat. That's about to be 5 minutes of dead space to someone who's watching the recording, right? So we don't record the classes. That is intentional. And it also adds to people asking their questions during the class. They're not going to say, oh, I'll just go back and watch the video, right? I didn't understand the last 30 minutes, but I'll just go back and watch the video. If there's not a recording, they feel more like, you know what? I didn't understand this. I need to ask. I need to ask about it because I can't go back and watch the video. Next, have a plan and don't waste their time. So I'm very strict on a lot of these things, which means I want to return that favor. I'm going to start on time and end on time every day, because that means that I'm respectful of your time. And as soon as I wait, and I did this, I made this mistake the very first time I taught in person, I was like, okay, well, we'll wait 5 minutes for everybody to be here. You know when everybody's going to show up the next day? 5 minutes late, and then 10 minutes late, and however you, and it's just a very slippery slope in that case. So we always start on time and end on time every single day. We make sure to do that. In addition, we share the curriculum before, during, and after. I feel very strongly about not sharing the video recordings, but the curriculum helps a lot with people feeling like, okay, I'm going to know what I'm getting myself into. I've reviewed it. This is relevant to me. All right, I'm in it. And then at the end, they can review that to make sure that they feel like they've fully understood. All right, next, get feedback. Feedback is so incredibly important for any class that you're running. The net promoter score, the 1 out of 10, honestly, I collect that just because it feels like I should, but that isn't the most valuable piece of information to me, because I know that I can flex the net promoter score like, oh, I hope you enjoyed today's class. I hope you rate it high. We'd love to get a 10. If it's a 9, please explain why. I don't do any of that. I don't want that. I don't focus any time on my net promoter score. What I focus on is, hey, we have 3 sections. What could we do? What did we do well? What could we do better? And just how are you doing? How well did you understand the material today? Because we are in Minnesota, the only one of those 3 questions that is required is what could we do better? Because Minnesotans will not tell you. They will not. And I say this as a Minnesotan, born and raised, lived here for all but 4 years of my life. They will not tell you because they want to be nice. And it is so unhelpful to be nice in these settings. Please tell me what didn't go right. Please tell me what we could do better next time. Please tell me what we should do different tomorrow. Because if you felt I wasted your time today, and then you give me a 10 out of 10, I am gonna waste your time the same way tomorrow. So please tell me what we could do differently. And you can think the class was great, but maybe you found a typo in the curriculum. That we can do better. Maybe you thought everything was great except for this one 30-minute lab, or this one question prompt, or this one time I made everybody raise their hand. All of those things are fair game. You need to make sure that it's a safe space for people to give that feedback, because in Minnesota, if you're asking for feedback and you don't require it and you don't make it clear that you really want it, they won't give it to you. And make sure that they understand that that feedback is read. One great way to do this is by implementing that feedback immediately the next day. I do put a caveat on that. I used to say that I read every word of feedback that is submitted, and then a student submitted the entire book, A Tale of Two Cities, in their feedback because there was not a character limit. So now I do put certain caveats on how much of the feedback I will read. I will not read full novels. Okay. Yeah, and then for yourself, create a list of improvements for next time. If you just start doing this, if you haven't collected feedback, you're going to get a ton of feedback. And please don't feel like you need to implement everything immediately. You will burn yourself out. So use that as your list, as your backlog for future improvements. Oh, Rachel, I didn't even talk about this. Thank you so much for building this up. Rachel says they've found building time to complete evaluations in training to be helpful in getting more evaluations. I absolutely agree. At the end of every single one of my trainings, I say, all right, I've shared the feedback link in the form. We have 10 minutes left. Stay on the call until you've completed your feedback. Because then that is the only way they will complete their feedback. Otherwise, people say, you know what, I'm just going to drop quick and I'll complete my feedback later today. They won't. It's a lie. They're not lying to you, they're lying to themselves, but they are saying, yeah, I'm busy right now. I just need to drop and come back. So I do give participants 10 minutes at the end of every class to complete their feedback, because that really leads to detailed, nuanced feedback, because they're like, yeah, I have the time to actually tell Luke where he screwed up today. So happy to do that in these 10 minutes. Thank you so much for calling that out. Yes. Absolutely. Wait to do recap and next steps. Ooh, that is good. Wait to even tell them, what's coming next for the next day. The reason I probably won't implement that strategy, I love the idea. The reason I don't think I'll implement that strategy is I have some people who really take a full 15 minutes to complete their feedback now, since they know that they'll have that time, and others do give me good, thorough feedback in 5 minutes. So I'm not quite as maniacal, but I love it. I absolutely love it. All right, fortunately, I've got 2 minutes left, and just one more tip. Don't cancel class. Try to get a backup for yourself. Get feedback from experts. If you're teaching something technical, I'm constantly asking other experts at C.H. Robinson, hey, this is what I'm teaching about deployment. Is this right? Because I'm about to produce 12 new software engineers who are going to write code like this. And if you don't stop me, this is how they will write it. So now's the time. So this has been incredibly valuable. Get the class on your team. And again, this goes back to that one-on-one trick, just making sure people know you're invested in them and their success. And lastly, remember, it's not about you. So this isn't about your being an entertainer. This isn't you feeling like you need to put all of the energy into the class. This is about their learning, and stay focused on, okay, are they actually learning what I want them to learn today? That has just been such a huge relief for me as an instructor and a facilitator, is I don't need to do anything today besides make sure that they learn. So that to me has meant a lot less lecture time, a lot less of me talking, and a lot more of them doing, which has been incredibly valuable. All right, I know this is at 10:40. Lisa says, before the session ends, before feedback, ask them to give their biggest takeaways from the session. Yes, absolutely. Just making sure that they cement those ideas. That is a terrific bonus tip from Lisa. All right. We are at time. I know we started a couple of minutes late, but as always, I said we're going to end on time. So please connect. Please let me know what I did wrong. I posted all of these slides on Twitter, which was weird. I don't think Twitter's meant for that, but please feel free to go there and have a public conversation with me, the parts you disagree with. I'll also make sure these slides are shared however that's easiest for the conference, to make sure that you have those. Please come find me on LinkedIn or Twitter. My last name is pretty weird, so if you can spell it, you will find me online. And thank you so much for your time today.